James was thinking about what he should do. He planned to teach the Watsons a lesson and make an example out of them. That way, everyone would know how easy it was for the Black Dragon to bring ruin to a family even though he had resigned. Xavier's threat sent shivers down Thea's back. She pleaded tearfully, "I was wrong, Mr. Watson. Please give me another chance." Xavier wanted to speak. However, the excruciating pain prevented him from doing so. Gavin was the same. After James inserted the silver needles into his body, he felt as if there were uncountable creepy crawlies crawling inside of him and devouring his flesh. At that moment, he was reminded of James' other identity. He was a genius doctor. Legend had it that the Black Dragon's medical skills were unrivaled. As such, his medical skills could also be used to kill a person. James' word frightened him. There was fear in his heart. He wanted to beg for forgiveness. However, the pain in his body was too excruciating. It felt as if bugs were chomping on his every muscle and bone. Ads by Pub Future. He wanted to faint right there and then. However, he was fully conscious. Mr. Caden, I beg you. Let me go. Gavin pleaded in a soft voice. Although it was soft, the crowd heard him. They could not believe their ears. Gavin Watson is begging for forgiveness. James walked toward him and crouched down. Then, he lifted him up and said coldly, still interested in exacting revenge on the Callahans. No more. Please let me go, Gavin pleaded, his teeth chattering. He was feeling uncomfortable all over his body. Veins were popping out on his face, and his expression was contorted. James reached out and pressed on a few spots on his body. The pain slowly dissipated. At that moment, he was paralyzed on the floor, sweating all over. James walked toward Thea and said, "Let's get going. The Watsons won't be targeting the Callahans anymore." Thea was hesitant. James turned and looked at Gavin on the floor and asked, "Isn't that true, Gavin?" "Yes, of course." Gavin got up and staggered toward Thea. He then apologized, "I'm really sorry, Ems. Thea, this is all just a misunderstanding. We won't do anything to the Callahans. I promise you. You may leave." Thea was relieved. She bowed deeply at Gavin. Then, she turned to the audience and bowed. I'm really sorry." Saying that, she turned to leave with James. The crowd was dumbfounded. That's it. They were there to watch the fun. They did not expect it to end so soon. After the female protagonist left, the engagement ceremony had come to an end. Everyone turned to leave. Xavier was brought to the hospital. In a ward of a hospital. Exasperated, Xavier cursed, "Damn you, James. I swear I'm gonna kill you." Wearing a surly expression, Gavin, who was by his side, said coldly, "Even though he's no longer one of the 5 commanders-in-chief, he's still as arrogant as always. Just you wait, James. The 5 provinces business alliance will ruin the Callahans. And say goodbye to that transgenerational group of yours." At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Maximus walked into the ward with a handful of gifts. Wearing a bright smile, he said, "Mr. Watson, I am here to pay you a visit." Xavier cried out, "Maximus, go after the Callahans. I want to see Thea tied up and brought before me. I want them to know what happens when you offend the Watsons." "Understood. Leave everything to me." At the Callahan residence, everyone gathered. They all wore surly expressions. Thea was still wearing the wedding dress that was worth $38 million. She was seated on the sofa. Looking at the Callahans who were wearing grim expressions, she spoke, "Dad, Mom. Stop blaming James. He did it for my sake. Besides, we're husband and wife. This is all my fault." Gladys stood up and slapped her across the face. "Are you as dumb as James? Do you not know who Xavier is? Do you still not know what kind of a man James is? He's incomparable to Xavier. A single word from you could have chased James away. But what have you done?" Gladys was frustrated at Thea. That had been the closest she ever got to having an impressive son-in-law. Her plans were ruined because of James. Tia's cheeks were reddened by the slap. She covered her face and sobbed, "What does this have to do with me? This was David's fault all along. If not for him stealing my money, this wouldn't even have happened in the first place." Talking back now, enraged, Gladys lifted her hand. Tia stood up and yelled, "That's right. It's his fault all along. Why do I have to clean up his mess?" Displeased, David stood up and said, "Don't blame this on me, Tia. If not for me, there's no way you could have cozied up with the Watsons. Now, great. All my efforts are wasted because of James." James smoked his cigarette by the side. Adds by Pub Future. He did not wish to be involved in the Clahans family affairs. Knock, knock, knock. Knocks came from the door. Benjamin went to answer the door. It was the Watsons. They were here to demand the betrothal gifts worth billions of dollars and the wedding dress Tia was wearing. However, since Tia had worn the wedding dress, they did not wish to get it back. Instead, they demanded compensation for it. The same went for the betrothal gifts. The Watsons gave them a deadline of 3 days. If they could not pay within the time limit, they would sue them by following the normal procedure. "It's over." David collapsed on the sofa and muttered, "I knew they wouldn't let us off the hook just like that. This is just the beginning. There'll be further reprisals." The whole family wore surly expressions. Compensation. Where on earth would they get that much money? James' face darkened. Gavin promised not to retaliate. It seemed his words could not be trusted. He had to wipe the Watsons off the map. Otherwise, this would never end. "What should we do, James?" Tia was at a loss. Anxious, she asked, "Where would we get all that money?" James lightly waved and said, "Just leave everything to me." James could not care less about an insignificant family like the Watsons. After all, to him, crushing them was an easy feat. "I'm going out for a while." James stood up and said to the tearful Tia, "I told you I can solve anything. I want to be the first person you come to whenever you encounter problems, all right? I don't want to be kept in the dark while everyone else knows what's going on. I'm your husband." "Okay." Tia nodded tearfully. James' words were powerful and eloquent. She believed in them. James headed out and went straight to the Watsons' villa. He planned to teach them a lesson. The moment he left, Maximus broke into the Callahan residence with his men. They then forcefully tied David and Tia up. "Prepare 1.8 billion and come to Osmanthus Villa before the sun sets. Otherwise, get ready to collect their bodies." Saying that, he and his men left with the abducted Tia and David. James did not know Tia and David had been abducted by Maximus and his men. He went to the Watsons' villa. However, there was no one there. After asking around, he found out that Xavier had been sent to the hospital. Gavin, on the other hand, was there accompanying his son. James then headed to the hospital. At the city hospital in Kensington. In the operation room, Gavin was pacing outside. In the corridor in the distance stood a few bodyguards in black suits and sunglasses. As Gavin knew that James was strong, he specifically brought them along. After all, he had begun his reprisal against the Callahans. He was worried about James coming for him. That was why he brought the bodyguards with him. They were vicious characters. Not only that, they were good fighters capable of taking down multiple men in seconds. The door of the operating room opened. A middle-aged doctor wearing a mask walked out. Gavin immediately walked over to him and asked anxiously, "How is he, Dr. Whitaker?" Dr. Whitaker removed his mask and sighed, "Mr. Gavin, his injuries are grave. The bones on his knees have completely shattered. It'll take a long time for him to recover. It'll take at least 3 to 5 years for him to walk again." "What?" Adds by Pub Future. Gavin's face turned pale. "3 to 5 years. Whitaker nodded. Gavin's face darkened. He clenched his fist and slammed it against the wall. "Curse you, James. I'll never forgive you. You'll pay for my son's suffering." Gavin was furious. When James was still the Black Dragon, he pressured the Five Provinces Business Alliance with his authority. Doing so allowed him to take over the transgenerational new city at below market price, and it brought a great loss to the Watsons. However, he was the Black Dragon, one of the 5 commanders-in-chief. The Five Provinces Business Alliance could only remain silent. However, that was in the past. The Five Provinces Business Alliance had begun developing plans to crush the transgenerational group and reclaim it. However, Gavin could not wait any longer. He wanted James to pay the price now. He pulled his phone out and called Maximus. Maximus greeted respectfully, "Mr. Gavin." Wearing a surly expression, Gavin asked, "How's the plan going?" Maximus replied, "Smoothly. I've brought Tia and David to Osmanthus Villa." "Very good." With a murderous look, Gavin hung up the call. He was a dangerous man. However, after keeping a low profile for so many years, everyone had forgotten about his viciousness. Soon, Xavier was out of the operating room. He lay on a bed in a special ward. His limbs were covered with plaster and bandages. "Dad, I can't feel my limbs. Am I crippled?" Xavier spoke, his voice trembling. He was only 27 years of age and was in the prime of his youth. He did not wish to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Gavin consoled him. "Xavier, don't you worry. Medical technology is advanced nowadays. They can even attach prosthetic legs in the case of amputation. Your injury is nothing compared to that. You'll recover after recuperating for a while. If it doesn't work, I'll just send you overseas." "Dad, I want to see James dead. I want to witness the destruction of the Callahans." Xavier bellowed with rage. "Xavier, stay calm. James will surely die. The Five Provinces Business Alliance is currently formulating a plan to fight against the transgenerational group. Though we aren't capable of targeting James for now, taking on the Callahans is an easy feat. Tia and David have been abducted. Dad, take me there. Tia, that BTCH. She humiliated me and my family. She's the reason I'm suffering. I want her dead." "Fine. I'll bring you to Osmanthus Villa." Furious, Xavier said coldly, "I'll make that BTCH pay." Gavin instructed his men to bring Xavier, who had just undergone an operation, to Osmanthus Villa in the suburbs. At the same time, he made a call. "Use the Watsons' connections and give the Callahans all we've got. I want them bankrupt before the sun sets. I want them burdened with huge debts. I want them to kneel before my son and beg for forgiveness." James went to the Watsons' villa and found no one. After asking around, he was told that Xavier and Gavin were at the hospital. Though he immediately headed there, he was too late. Again, James found no one. He called Jake immediately. Soon, the call went through. "Hey there, isn't this the Black Dragon? How's it going?" James could hear his sarcastic tone. James ordered, "I need to know the whereabouts of the Watsons. Get on it now." "James, you're no longer the Black Dragon. You have no right to order me around. Please stop contacting me from today onward." Jake did not give James any face. He was involved in the buying and selling of intelligence. While James was still the Black Dragon, Jake was fearful of him. After all, people involved in shady businesses were afraid of government officials. However, now that James had resigned, Jake no longer feared him. Besides, due to his work nature, he had lots of insider information. He knew that many wanted James dead. James was currently in a precarious position. "Very well, Jake Graham." James hung up the phone. Even Jake had begun disobeying him. They believed that he was now a clawless tiger. Ads by Pub Future. James did not know where Xavier and Gavin went. Unwilling to trouble the Blight King, he went straight home. Before entering the house, he could hear a dispute. Walking in, he found Lex sitting in the living room hitting the floor with his cane. "Trash. What trash? Benjamin, Gladys, do you know how much trouble that useless son-in-law has brought us?" Every single corporation has now terminated its contract with our family. They even sued us, saying there were quality concerns in our products. Eternality Group is now sealed off. Our capital chain has been cut off, and we are now billions of dollars in debt. Lex cursed. The Watsons were quick to act. Such calamity had befallen the Callahans in such a short amount of time. They were doomed. Gladys, Benjamin, and Alyssa sat on the sofa. They were anxious. Thea and David had just been abducted. There were many other Callahans besides Lex. Howard, John, and the youngsters' families were all there. They all reproached Benjamin and his family. They admonished James. James walked in and overheard them. What? His face darkened. What's the big deal? Everyone turned to look at him. Lex slammed his cane on the floor and bellowed with rage. You're trash. You are always making trouble for us. I'll kill you. James raised his hand and blocked his cane. Howard stepped forward with his head held high and yelled, You think you're so good? Watch this. He lifted his leg to kick James. James moved his body. Howard missed and fell to the ground. Tossing Lex's cane onto the floor, James walked toward the sofa and sat down. Immediately, he realized Thea was missing. He hurriedly asked, Gladys, where's Thea? Gladys' eyes were red. Her tears had already dried up. She burst into tears and rebuked James. It's all your fault. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have to go through such an ordeal. Thea and David were abducted by Maximus' men. He told us to gather money and go to Osmanthus Villa before the sun sets. Otherwise, we'll have to collect their bodies. James' face darkened. Damn you, Maximus. He smashed the table. It was a glass table. The table was instantly smashed to pieces. The glass fragments scattered on the floor. He stood up and looked at the Callahans. Listen to me and stay here. Don't go anywhere else before I return. Otherwise, don't blame me if something happens. Saying that, he turned to leave. Meanwhile, the Callahans were staring at the shattered glass table, unable to return to their senses. In the basement of Osmanthus Villa, Thea and David were tied to a chair. Looking at Thea in her wedding dress, her curvaceous figure and flawless features, Maximus gulped. He had been eyeing Thea for quite some time now. He wanted to seize this opportunity to get into bed with her. Before that, Xavier had gotten in his way. To become the king of the underworld in Kensington, he had to suppress his desires. However, now that she and Xavier had had a falling out, the thoughts resurfaced in his mind. Maximus, what a fine woman she is. Her smooth and fair skin is capable of seducing any man. You are in luck. Can we try her out after you do? His men stared at Thea with saliva dripping from their mouths. Maximus slapped one of his men across the face and scolded, This is Xavier's woman. We'll wait for him to come. Now that Thea has humiliated him, he'll surely torture her to death. When the time comes, I might take up your offer. Yes, of course. You're right. His men nodded. Although they could not touch her, they could stare. Staring at her intently, they made obscene remarks. Thea had never experienced this before. Her face was pale, and her body was shivering. David, meanwhile, had passed out. Soon, Xavier and Gavin arrived. Ads by Pub Future. Xavier was carried into the basement. Mr. Gavin, Mr. Xavier, Maximus greeted respectfully. Greeting, Mr. Gavin. Greetings, Mr. Xavier, Maximus' men said in unison. Looking at Thea while lying on the stretcher, Xavier cackled. Thea, I gave you my heart. I put in so much effort to marry you. But, what about you? You humiliated me for the sake of a piece of trash. You humiliated the Watsons. Mr. Xavier, please let me go. Thea's face was pale. She kept pleading. Xavier cried out, Men, untie her. Maximus immediately ordered his men to untie her. Thea was untied. Xavier pointed at the floor and cried out, Get your *SS over here and kneel. Thea knelt and kowtowed, begging for forgiveness. I'm begging you. Please let me go. Drag her here. Yes. Maximus stepped forward and grabbed Thea's hair. He then dragged her to Xavier and pinned her down on the floor. Xavier was lying on the stretcher and could not move. "Slap her," he ordered. It was because of this woman that he had suffered such excruciating pain. Maximus grabbed Thea by her hair and slapped her across the face. Her face instantly swelled. Paralyzed by the slap, she heard a buzzing sound reverberating through her skull. She could not regain her senses. The commotion in the basement woke David up. Upon opening his eyes, he saw Thea being grabbed by her hair and slapped mercilessly. He trembled and immediately pleaded, Maximus. Mr. Xavier, my brother-in-law, have mercy on me." Upon hearing David addressing him as a brother-in-law, Xavier felt as if a blade had pierced through his heart. "David, I could have been your brother-in-law. You could have been enjoying my riches, but your sister ruined everything. Beat him up. I'll make you suffer the same pain I did. Break his limbs." Xavier's face was contorted with rage. "Understood." A few men walked toward David. One of them grabbed a metal pipe and slammed it on David's knee. "Ah!" he screamed in agony. David's eyes were bulging, and he had a distorted facial expression. Crack! Another strike came. David's other knee shattered. Blood began dripping onto the floor. Unable to withstand the pain, he passed out immediately. Seeing this, Thea was fearful. She curled up on the floor, her body shivering. If she knew what was coming, she would not have humiliated Xavier and the Watsons just because she felt guilty for mistreating James. If she knew what was coming, she would not have left with James. She was filled with remorse. "Thea, this is what happens when you go against me. I gave you a chance to be my wife, to be Mrs. Watson's, but no, you just had to go against me." Xavier gritted his teeth. He liked Thea. Her every move deeply attracted him. He wanted to be with her. Even though she had a husband, he did not mind. However, he did not expect Thea to humiliate him at the engagement ceremony. By leaving with James, she had put him to shame. Not only that, James had even crippled him. Thea Callahan, the most beautiful woman in Kensington. But not for long, I'm afraid. I'll make you the ugliest woman in Kensington. If I can't have you, no one else can. And since I can't have you, I might as well ruin you. His face contorted with rage, Xavier barked, "Prepare the gasoline." Maximus immediately ordered, "Get moving, quick." A few men swiftly left the basement to get some gasoline. Thea was dismayed. She did not know what awaited her. She knew there would be no escape for her. By offending the Watsons, even her family was doomed. Her tears had dried up. Ads by Pub Future. She curled on the ground and hugged her knees. She sobbed. Gavin knew what was about to happen. "I'll be outside." He stood up and left. It was all because of Thea that his son had to go through this. She would have to die. Soon, Maximus' men walked in with a few cans of gasoline. "We brought them," Xavier ordered, "pour it on her." "Understood." They nodded. Then, they opened the cans and poured it all on Thea. Upon detecting the smell of gasoline, she was horror-struck. She cried out, "No. No. Please, I'm begging you. Let me go. Please give me a chance. I'll repay you for not killing me." Thea was truly terrified. Her fear of death sent shivers down her spine. "Too late," Xavier said coldly. "I gave you a chance, Thea. You didn't make good use of it. Since you can't be my wife, there's no need for you to continue living anymore." Though Xavier was a gentleman on the outside, he was actually a petty and malicious man. If he could not get his hands on something, he would rather destroy it. "Wake that guy up. I want Thea to see with her eyes that it's her fault her brother's gonna die a horrible death." A few men walked over and woke the unconscious David. "Cripple his arms." "Understood." Maximus' men nodded and began torturing David. His painful screams reverberated throughout the room. The louder his screams, the more pleased Xavier was. Lying on the stretcher, he looked at the wedding dress ordained with diamonds Thea was wearing. What a beautiful wedding dress. With such a beautiful dress accompanying you to the afterlife, you should be satisfied. Light her up. Maximus was hesitant. Thea was a renowned beauty, after all. Not to mention she was still a virgin. What a shame if she was ruined just like that. Since you don't want her anymore, could you give her to me and my men to enjoy ourselves? Though Maximus had slept with many women, he did not have experience with such a fine woman. As he thought it would be a waste, he plucked up the courage and brought up the idea. Death would be too easy for her for what she did. We should FCK her, videotape it, and upload it on the internet. Disgracing her good name is far better than just killing her. Maximus offered his suggestion. She's your woman. You should be the one doing it. But, since it would be cumbersome for you to do so at the moment, why don't you leave the arduous task to us? Xavier wanted Thea to die. He burst into a peal of laughter upon hearing Maximus' words. Haha, sure. I want the world to see how pathetic the wife of the Black Dragon is. I want the Black Dragon humiliated. Xavier laughed. Immediately, he ordered, take her out and wash her clean. I'll do it myself. Mr. Xavier, don't push yourself. If you truly aren't capable of doing it, there's always. Wait, the Black Dragon. Maximus' face turned pale. He exclaimed, what do you mean by the wife of the Black Dragon? Is that a joke? Isn't he Thea's backer? Didn't he die on the battlefield at Mt. Thunder Pass? It was no longer a secret that the Black Dragon was Thea's backer. It was also no longer a secret that the Black Dragon had crossed all the big shots in Kensington. News had spread that a lot of powerful people wanted him dead. However, before they could act, news came that he had died on the battlefield at Mt. Thunder Pass. Yet, now, Xavier was saying that Thea was the Black Dragon's wife. J. James, the son-in-law of the Callahans. He's the Black Dragon. Maximus wore a fearful expression. Cut the CRP. Take her out now. Xavier could not wait any longer. Remember, get a woman to clean her up. I don't wish for any other man to have a glimpse at her body before I do. Yes, of course. Maximus nodded immediately. He did not think much of it. To him, Thea must have had some sort of intimate relationship with the Black Dragon while he was still alive. That was why Xavier said she was the Black Dragon's wife. Thea was forcefully dragged away. Maximus ordered a few women to clean Thea up. After that, they brought her to a room in Osmanthus Villa. Meanwhile, Maximus was getting the camera ready. Although he could not have a taste of her, watching was not too bad either. Besides, Xavier was crippled and could not move. He would require assistance. Maximus would then take on the task. After Xavier had finished enjoying himself, Thea would fall into his hands. In a room in Osmanthus Villa. Ads by Pub Future. Thea cowered in the bed. She covered her body with a blanket with only her head exposed. Hearing footsteps outside the room, she trembled in fear. Creak. The door opened. Xavier was carried in. Maximus and his men were close behind. Maximus had prepared the camera. After being carried into the room, Xavier ordered, be careful when you film it. Don't show my face. I don't want to be the laughingstock of the world. Don't you worry, I won't. I've been in this business before. The shooting angle will be flawless. Xavier ordered his servants to remove his clothes. Soon, he was naked. He was placed on the bed. Thea, if you don't want things to get more complicated, you better serve me well. Boom! A loud sound could be heard outside. Then, the door was kicked open. Wearing a furious expression, a man in a black overcoat walked in. It was James who had hurriedly made his way over. Everyone turned to look at the door. Seeing it was James, they chuckled. Maximus said sarcastically, I wonder who it is. Turns out it's the son-in-law of the Callahans. Why are you here? Are you here to witness your wife being cut by other men? James' face was dark. Clenching his fists, he walked straight toward them. Maximus ordered, get him. A few men pulled out machetes and slashed at James. James dodged the attacks. He reached out and grabbed the wrist of one of the men. Ah! The man screamed in pain. James snatched the machete in his hand. He wanted to see blood. However, upon recalling that Thea was present, he did not wish to let her witness such a gruesome scene, so he gave the man a kick. The man was sent flying. How could a thug stand against James, after all? In an instant, all of them had collapsed onto the floor. James headed to the side of the bed and lifted Thea, who was cowering in fear, along with the blanket. He turned to leave. Stop him. Don't let him leave, Xavier roared. However, only Maximus remained. Seeing that James was about to leave the room, he drew his gun. He opened fire. Bang! James waved his hand and a silver needle accurately blocked the bullet. Then, he threw another one. Maximus' body immediately went limp. He turned to leave without looking back. Thea, who was in his arms, cried her eyes out. It's all right now, James consoled her. Then, he apologized, sorry for taking so long. He brought her outside. A car was waiting outside Osmanthus' villa. It was a car Henry would normally use. Since Henry was at the hospital, Whitney was the one driving. He carried Thea into the car. James, my brother's still in the basement. Save him, Thea exclaimed. Got it. James put Thea down and said to Whitney, bring her to common clinic. Whitney nodded and said, be careful, James. I couldn't care less about these insignificant creatures. Wearing a cold expression, James turned to leave. Whitney turned to look at Thea and said nothing. Then, she started the engine and drove away. James returned to Osmanthus' villa. At the same time, he called the Blythe King. I'm at Osmanthus' villa in the suburbs. Clean up the mess in an hour. Hanging up the phone, he headed straight toward the basement. Many of Maximus' men were guarding the place. James walked toward them. In an instant, the fight was over. They all died a gruesome death. He saw David, who was tied up, and the blood dripping on the floor. It was David's blood. James slightly frowned. He walked over to David and took his pulse. Then, he checked his body condition. Adds BiPAP future. It's serious. David's knees were shattered. His limbs were broken. He had suffered excruciating torture. Now, he was hanging on his last breath. James untied him. His body immediately fell forward. James caught him in time. David regained consciousness. The moment he saw James, he wanted to reproach him. However, he could not utter a single word. James pulled a few silver needles out and used them to keep David conscious. Then, carrying him in his arms, he walked out of the basement. There was a commotion outside. Before James could even leave the basement, hundreds of armed men gathered outside. They were carrying metal rods 2 meters in length and machetes. Kill him. A middle-aged man stood at the back. It was Gavin. Wearing a surly expression, he said coldly, James, I didn't think you'd show yourself. This will be your final resting place. James stared at them coldly. You piece of trash. Looking down on me. Carrying David in his arms, he walked straight toward them. Get him. Kill him. Hundreds of armed men charged toward James. They hacked at James with machetes. Even though James was all alone, they stood no chance against him. James dodged a series of their attacks while looking for an opening. When an opportunity presented itself, he was merciless. Soon, hundreds of men lay on the floor. Their limbs were broken, and they lay on the floor motionless. Their deaths were gruesome. Gavin was stunned. Though he knew that James' strength was unrivaled, he did not expect him to be this strong. He was able to take down hundreds of men even while carrying a gravely injured David. Gavin pulled out a revolver. Don't move. I'll shoot you. His hands were trembling. His forehead was beaded with sweat. James reached toward his waist and grabbed a silver needle. The needle flew out of his hand. Before Gavin could open fire, the needle had pierced through his skin. His body went limp, and he collapsed onto the floor. James put David down and went to the room upstairs. Then, dragging the naked Xavier, he headed straight to the window and threw him off the second floor. Ah! A scream of agony came from downstairs. As it was only the second floor, Xavier did not fall to his death. However, all his bones were shattered. Maximus lay on the ground, looking at James slowly. Approaching him, his face turned pale, and his teeth began chattering. Mr. Caden, have mercy on me. James lifted him and threw him out the window like a rag doll. Then, he leaped out of the window himself. He landed on his feet. Then, he lifted Xavier and tossed him aside. Sitting on a flight of stairs, he lit a cigarette. Do you think you can stand against me just because I've resigned? James looked at the bloodied Xavier and said coldly, I warned you not to approach my wife. Why are you digging your own grave? In the afternoon, Xavier had his knee bones shattered and limbs broken, and he had just undergone surgery for those injuries. Before he could rest and recover, James had thrown him off the second floor. The bones all over his body were shattered. He was in excruciating pain. He lay in a pool of blood, motionless. At that moment, he felt fearful of death. His teeth chattering, he pleaded in a weak voice, don't kill me. I beg you, give me a chance. I'm rich. I can give you money. He was truly afraid of death. He had never experienced such fear. The fear of death overwhelmed him. Save me. Bring me to the hospital. Xavier knew he would die if he remained here. James sat on the flight of stairs and stared at Gavin coldly. He then said, Xavier's an idiot. But, why did you join in with his foolish theatrics? Have you gone senile with your age? Though I've resigned from my post, I'm still the former commander-in-chief. Even if I'm decommissioned, what makes you think you can step on me? Quote. Gavin opened his mouth. However, the excruciating pain he felt prevented him from speaking. Another man lay by the side. It was David. Though he had been suffering immense pain, he was saved by James' silver needles, which protected his arteries and veins. Otherwise, he would have been dead by now. Adds by Pub Future. At that moment, he was conscious. He could hear James' words. He froze. Be Black Dragon. James is the Black Dragon. How could this be? How could the useless son-in-law of the Callahans be the Black Dragon? The Black Dragon's the chairman of Majestic Corporation. He died on the battlefield at Mt. Thunder Pass in the Southern Plains. Everyone knows that. The general from the Southern Plains declared his death. There's no mistaking it. David could not believe that James was the Black Dragon. He could not believe this good-for-nothing trash who had been constantly ordered around was the Black Dragon. At that moment, he could not think much about it. His head was spinning due to the pain. The moment he started thinking, he got a headache. Anyone who crosses my boundary will die. And Thea Callahan is the boundary. James stood up. He headed towards Xavier, who was lying in a pool of blood, and stomped on his crotch. Ah! Xavier's eyes bulged. His facial expression was distorted, and he let loose a scream of agony. Following that, he passed out. You. Gavin's face turned pale. Xavier was his only son. He had not gotten married yet. Gavin had not gotten a grandchild yet. Now, he was doomed. And you. James headed toward Gavin and said coldly, what did you tell me in the afternoon? You told me you wouldn't retaliate against the Callahans. That's why I spared your life. But, look at what you've done. Do you seriously think you can step all over me as you please? James lifted his leg and stomped on Gavin's chest. He aimed for his heart. Ah! Gavin screamed in pain. Then, his body went limp. He was dead. James approached Maximus. Maximus had been thrown from the second floor by James. He broke his leg and lay on the ground motionless. Upon seeing James approaching him, he shivered in fear. He was filled with remorse. If only he knew that James was the Black Dragon, he would not have targeted Thea or blackmailed David. Be Black Dragon. See Commander-in-Chief. Have mercy. I was wrong. Please spare my life. I'm willing to do anything. Maximus pleaded. Maximus, I've never crossed you. Why did you have to target the Callahans? James stood in front of him and glared at him coldly. He lifted his leg and stomped. Maximus, the man who could have become the king of the underworld in North Kensington, was now dead. Both Gavin and Maximus were now dead. Hundreds of men lay dead in the villa. Only one survived. It was Xavier. Although he was still alive, he was crippled. His limbs were broken, and his reproductive organ was destroyed. Even if he survived, he would have to spend the remainder of his life in a wheelchair. Soon, the Blight King arrived. After receiving James' call, he got anxious and immediately deployed the helicopters. Soon, a few helicopters arrived and landed at the villa. The Blight King, who was in military attire with a 5-star badge on his shoulder, appeared. Seeing Gavin, Maximus, and Xavier lying in a pool of blood, the Blight King hurried over to James. He frowned. What happened? Nothing big. James pointed at Maximus lying on the floor and said, that man's involved in shady businesses. Investigate him and uproot his entire forces from the underworld. As for Gavin, just say he was arrested or killed by the military while conspiring with someone from the underworld. Saying that, he looked at Xavier, who was on his last breath. Send that guy to the hospital. Whether he survives or not depends on his fate. James did not kill Xavier. The Watsons were part of the 5 Provinces Business Alliance. James spared Xavier to send a message to the 5 Provinces Business Alliance to warn them against causing trouble. Otherwise, trouble would only keep coming. The Blight King shrugged his shoulders. Ads by pub future. He thought that James would know his limits. He did not expect him to finish them off so viciously. He tactfully refrained from asking any further. Although James was merciless, he never harmed the innocent. All he ever killed were wicked men who had evaded the judgment of the law. Besides, James was the commander-in-chief of the Southern Plains. When he was officially appointed, the Emperor of Saul had bestowed upon him the blade of justice. As such, he had special authority to execute anyone as a fait accompli. James beckoned at a general and pointed at David, who was lying on the ground. Bring him to the hospital. Blight King, I'll have to borrow your helicopter for a while. The Blight King nodded and ordered his men, quick. Bring him to the hospital. Understood. A few soldiers immediately carried David onto the helicopter. The Blight King handed James a cigarette. The two sat on the flight of stairs of Osmanthus Villa. James, I had to clean up your mess again. In exchange, could you tell me what the Emperor said to you when you returned to the capital? Why did you resign all of a sudden? The Blight King had been pondering on this. However, he could not figure it out. James smoked his cigarette. Looking at the pitch-black night sky, he murmured, the situation in Saul is too chaotic. The government is divided into several factions. Some among them are ambitious and power-hungry. They didn't go on a rampage because they were intimidated by the strength of the 5 commanders-in-chief. This is only just the beginning. The Blight King was puzzled. He could not understand what James meant. James stood up and patted his back. Someone will be here for you soon. You better choose a side wisely. Don't pick the wrong one. Saying that, James turned to leave. The Blight King sat on the stairs. Smoking his cigarette, he lifted his head to look at the pitch-black sky. He was a plain-spoken man. He did not know the dynamics of the court. However, James had been clear enough. The Blight King could see a storm brewing on the horizon. Sigh. A storm's coming. The Blight King sighed. At the same time, David was sent to the hospital. As James had treated his injuries before this, he was quickly resuscitated. Meanwhile, James made his way to Common Clinic. At the clinic, Thea had changed into brand new clothes that belonged to Whitney. The two were seated in the room, looking at each other. Whitney had long heard of Thea. She just did not have the opportunity to meet her. Now that she had met her, she could not help but marvel at her beauty. She was truly the most beautiful woman in Kensington. Meanwhile, Thea frowned. Who's this girl? Why is she with James? The television on the clinic's table was broadcasting news. All of a sudden, there was a special news report. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have breaking news. Just a few moments ago, the military received intelligence that there was an illegal gathering of criminal groups in a villa in the suburbs. The army was deployed to put them down. The Watsons were among the criminal groups. In the process of gunfire, Gavin Watson resisted arrest and was killed at the scene. Then, the Blight King appeared on TV. A reporter was interviewing him. The Blight King stood in front of Osmanthus Villa and said to the reporters, "No crime is allowed in Kensington. We promise to take all necessary steps to inhibit crime." What? Seeing this, Thea was dumbfounded.